Hello. From a bunch of memes and videos, you probably know that there was a sale and on it with a bunch of coupons, I bought a processor and a motherboard, and a Snowman. The Snowman is not one that is media item and competes with Deepcool Gamax 300, and it has 2 heat pipes. It may seem that this is an analog of Deepcool Ice Edge Mini, but it is not. It is better than the Ice Edge Mini for 2 reasons. First, it is larger, its radiator, like the fan, 90 by 90 mm, the Ice Edge Mini, 80 by 80. Second, the Snowman has a 4-pin fan connector, not a 3-pin one. It costs $13, and I got it for 11. Perfectly packed, absolutely not crumpled, almost perfect base. Included with it is a ring for installing this cooler to Intel, fits to the 775th socket, to the 1155, 1150, 1151, 1200, and as it is written here, to the 1366th socket. On sockets 1366, 1356, 2011 and 2011 and 3, the location of the holes is identical. And seller put 5 legs for the ring, 1 is obtained in reserve. Why am I saying all this? I follow the operating instructions. Read together. If you are satisfied, I am satisfied. Yes, please praise our product. Friend, we need your support. Well, how can I not support it? In general, you will soon see for yourself. Let's move on to more interesting things. Motherboard, Kllisre, socket 1356. As poor as possible, no radiator on the VRM, only one SATA 3, no USB 3 at all, not even soldered to the front panel. Only 3 pins of the case fan connector. The difference between the cheapest motherboard from the store and from AliExpress is significant. Producer saved absolutely everything here. But it is completely new, even the socket is new here. No one put anything here. All this can be forgiven for the motherboard, since our processor is Intel Xeon E5-2420 V2, 6 cores, 12 threads, boost for 1 core 2 and 7 GHz, for all cores, 2.5 GHz. Its stated power consumption is 80 watts. The motherboard cost me $32, and the processor, $7. But currency of ruble performs tricks even when the wind is just blowing, so now the motherboard and a processor cost $58. Therefore, this set remains relevant against the background of dying, but not getting cheaper 45nm stones at 1156 and 1366. They have their own characteristics, which is why people refuse to collect on these sockets, a respectable age, high power consumption, which makes you choose the motherboard more carefully, and the lack of a ring bus. And of course, the growing prices for 2011 and 2011 and 3, sets that reach the price of the same as 310 and the new 9100 F4B350 and first generation of AMD Ryzen, also make you pay attention to 1356. There are no complaints about the packaging, the processor cover looks almost new. You should always understand that servers are assembled by professionals with extensive experience and are seriously responsible for this, so you can be 99% sure that the processor is like new. What cannot be said about the stones from Xeon on Avito, which could be anything. This must be understood. The collecting is completely normal, the processor in the socket, then the ring under the cooler, then the memory. Memory, by the way, we will have 2 bars of 4 GB from Samsung, the usual desktop memory. Then we put on the cooler and with a probability of 99% we will crumple the lower ribs to it, but this will not affect the temperatures, and in the assembled state it is not visible. Next, we collect as follows. Xeon goes to a normal building, well, in my usual building, CS102 Aerocool, and Athlon X4 840 goes to the case from the trash. By the way, I put a ring for the Snowman cooler. The ring that was sent with the motherboard is tightly snapped, I just got scared to cling to it. The Snowman's ring and fastenings are different, and it is easy to put it on. A Snowman is a thing, guys. The final config turned out to be 2420 V2, IV Bridgend 22 nanometers, Snowman, 1356 China Mother, 2x4 gigs DDR3, which operates at a frequency of 1333 MHz. In the BIOS, the memory settings are blocked. I suppose this is an old BIOS, although it is stated that V2 works with 1600 memory, but it will be as it is. GT1030 GDDR5 card, AirMax 600 watt power supply and WD Blue 7200 per terabyte. In CPU-Z, we get approximately the following results: 260 single-thread, 1900 multi-thread, multi-thread 7 and 3. It would seem that 12 threads, and multi-thread 7 and 3. Well, this is nonsense. The more threads and the more acceleration, the closer multi-thread to the number of physical cores. In the CPU Queen, the processor gives out 43,000 points, and according to the results of this test and the CPU-Z Bench 2420 V2 is the closest in performance to the Eternal Core i7 2600 and bypasses the Ryzen 5 2400G. The cache and memory test looks scary: 19 GB for reading, 17 for writing, 90 nanoseconds delay. This motherboard does not provide any possibility to raise the frequency or change the timings. Oh, well, we have as much as 15 MB of L3 cache, which still works. And of course the test of multi-core systems, Cinebench R20. Let's run it together with you. Shooting from the screen, by the way, takes away productivity. And here we get 2.5 million points and bypass Xeon Platinum by about 150 times. Although for a more accurate result, it is better to extract the archive with the program before launching. And without jokes, our processor knocks out 1376 points. But before the test and games, I will show the CPU temperature.
Так, вот короче, 24-22, стресс-тест AIDA. Температура сейчас 42, 43, 44, 45. ТДП 44 ватта. Ни одной вертушки на вдув, один снеговик. На выдув тоже ничего нет.
I don't have any tricks here, no nitrogen glasses on the pros, no split system in the room, even the window is closed. To the left of my plain place is a battery with boiling water. Intel is not hot. In idle time, the temperature of the stone is close to room temperature, 25-26 degrees. Well, let's start the test and games. For most games, there will be two options for settings, for a more or less comfortable game with GT 1030, and the second option, the maximum FPS that the processor can produce. The first game that Athlon 840 had difficulty with was Assassin's Creed Unity. These settings are playable, 1600 by 900 and everything is set to low. In full there is lack of video memory. And we get 35 to 40 FPS. Sometimes the image may be torn or the frames may be slow. These are not Xeon's breaks, these are the features of the recording system in the form of an Athlon 840 and a Chinese capture card for 1000 rubles. That is, the FPS that we see on monitoring, this is what it is, since Xeon does not take part in video capture. When in the game we go away from the crowds of people, the load falls on the video card and on the processor, and the FPS is going to 70 FPS. Now it's time for absolute FPS. The request of people who distinguish high graphics settings from ultra settings: turn off this video, it will be scary. The screen resolution is 640 by 480 pixels. With a minimum load on the video card, the FPS does not fall below 60, and in some moments it reaches 3-digit numbers. This game uses all 12 threads evenly, and the CPU usage sometimes reaches 90%. The next game is Far Cry 5. The settings for a comfortable game are the same as in Unity, 1600 by 900 and all at a minimum. The minimum FPS is 30, the average is 37, and the maximum is 43. In HD and with a resolution conversion of up to half, it was possible to approach a stable 60 frames per second. The minimum FPS was 56. In the next game, the 840th Athlon did not give out even 20 FPS stable. Assassin's Creed Odyssey. HD and half the resolution. The average FPS was 56, but there are freezes. They are clearly visible on the chart, but during the game they are almost invisible. I suspect that this is caused by a low frequency of RAM. In 1600 to 900, the average FPS was 32 and there were fewer freezes. Although fans of statistics will say that the minimum FPS is almost twice lower. Here, the maximum FPS is obtained in the form of peaks on the chart, and the freeze is sometimes surrounded by such peaks. The video card doesn't relate to freezes. The next game just dropped our platform. Doom Eternal. Just one segment of the game, full HD resolution and low graphics settings. And here, along with the processor load, which does not always reach 20%, we see an almost constant underload of the video card. What is the reason? Low memory frequency. In dynamics, the frame rate does not fall below 20, it's hard to play, but you can. Again, I will say that some video distortion and the fact that I rarely hit enemies is a lack of video capture. Due to the fact that I play games that I output 9600 GT, that receives information from the USB capture card, which receives info from HDMI from GT 1030, in general, there is a noticeable input lag. In the next game it feels even stronger. Fortnite. Low graphics settings, 100% resolution scale, and full HD. It doesn't make sense to put it lower, because you need to see your enemies, and not just run around in soap. With these settings, it is never lower than 60 frames per second, and the processor is about half loaded. Most often you can see 80 FPS. You can win and even win without any problems, but this is my fourth time in this game and I haven't figured out how half of the items work yet. Excellent FPS can be observed in the Rocket League. By the way, it became free from September 23. Without a lock of frames on high settings, often with an emphasis on the GPU, I have not seen the frame rate fall below 70, and most often it is 90 FPS. The game uses only 4 threads, of which the main load falls on the 11 or 12 thread. Reduce the image quality for more FPS does not make sense. The playing experience is perfect. Another Far Cry, but older, Far Cry Primal. This game unpleasantly surprised me with its optimization. In full HD on low we get from 30 to 40 frames not inclusive. The game often puts the entire load on 4 or even 2 threads, most often on 1, 2, 11 and 12, so sometimes the stone is boosted to 2 and 6 GHz. The result came out like this, worse than that of Far Cry 5, which came out 2 years after this game. The next game just humiliated my 1030. Horizon Zero Dawn. 640 by 480, half resolution. I couldn't get away from the emphasis on the GPU, so we have what we have. 30 stable frames, and the CPU load is less than half. On the screen we have like a port with the first PlayStation. Hermione, are you sure you're 16? I can't go any further because I can't see which button I should press. But you can get stuck in textures without any problems. I am not joking, there's no way out. Only if you don't lose weight. Many people blame the next game for optimization, but as I see it, it is optimized well for a multi-core processor. Kingdom Come Deliverance. 640 by 480. Even in a small resolution, there is an emphasis on the video card, but the FPS is kept in the region of 80 frames, but if there are few non-player characters around, there are more than 100 frames per second. If you scale 900p to 1080p, the FPS usually stays around 40. It's time for real pixels. Minecraft. Drawing range, 16 chunks, Forge, Optifine, Silder's light shaders. When flying, the FPS drops below 30, in forests where there are a lot of shadows, it can fall to 20, and when you stand still, the game tries to dump all the load on one core, which exactly is not important for game. But if you reduce the drawing distance to 14 chunks, 30 FPS becomes stable. The processor actively loads chunks, so it seems that even the drawing has not decreased. Without shaders and with 16 chunks, we get 140-150 FPS. With fast movement to unexplored lands, the FPS even increases since the load from one thread spreads to all 12. In general, with shaders of 60 FPS without a processor with a strong single core, it will not be possible to achieve. Need for Speed hit, Full HD, resolution scale 9/10. During the day, below 30 FPS does not sync, but to be honest, at night in the chase can be less than 20, because of the video card of course. In a resolution of 1024 by 768 and with a half scale, we do not get even 50 frames stable, but at 30 FPS both during the day and at night. You can count on it. And the last game, the pinnacle of optimization, Watch Dogs 2. Low settings, Full HD. In the batch, again, no drops. 30 frames with an emphasis on the GPU, we have. And also as in the hit 1024 by 768, the pixel density is half. The minimum FPS that I have seen is 49. The game is very stable, no dynamics can cause serious drops. Play alone or over the network with the comfort gameplay. So, with the advent of Xeon E5-2420 V2, I forgot that games can freeze. Even in the Dune, there is just a low FPS. But in other games, we often get FPS close to 60. At the same time, the processor remains energy efficient and cold, but its price does not remain stable. Conclusions to do as usual to you, and it was Shrek and see you soon.